cracks because he isn't, because he's not in the school. You understand? So not being in front of the teachers and things like that, you know, he can miss out on things or not really understand, and there's no one there he can ask. So I'm gonna keep him home.
Okay.
But you know, I also want to make sure that he grasps everything and he doesn't fall through the cracks and doesn't miss out on anything, especially being that this is the first year.
Yes, well, I
So
want you to,
that's a major issue.
I want you to stay in tune because we'll be addressing that as well. All right.
Okay, great.
I have a whole bunch here. Let me see. A fear, safety in traveling to school. A fear, remote only will be in the downfall of the school year for my school, for my students. Sorry. A fear and a hope. Members of our, a fear, a member of our community gets sick. Yes. A hope we can work together to keep each other safe and happy. Okay. For Michelle, a fear our COVID numbers goes up, and a hope that the students are helped socially and emotionally. Okay. Evie, right, Rayback. Hello, Evie. A fear disagreements and miscommunication between City Hall and Albany will get in the way of smart. Oh, it's coming in so fast. Sorry. Of smart. Sorry, I lost that. I lost that. Oh, smart planning. Yes, yes. And a hope is strong, smart plans in place before Labor Day that will keep everyone safe and happy. Nicole, one of our teachers, fear someone gets sick. We can find ways to build community, and a hope is to find ways to build community in all situations and build community in spite of the obstacles. Stephanie, a hope we can keep the connections between student and educators and each other. Nia, a fears COVID goes up, it might go through another lockdown. Another fear, how to keep students, how to keep the school spirit and engagement with students. Yes. Shannon, a fear, going remote only will mean my daughter misses out on the technology learning that was one of the big reasons she chose Maker. A hope, Maker finds good ways for freshmen to get to know each other in school in spite of the weirdness. Another hope, the that blended and hopefully moving in full moving to full in person will allow him to stay motivated with career choices. So as I go through these hopes and these fears, I'm noticing we all have very similar hopes and fears. And as I say, this will all be addressed today. I don't know if we will satisfy what you're asking for specifically, but we will definitely have a discussion and give you some information that is definitely wrapped around safety, which I'm recognizing, and the obstacles in remote learning. I have some more here. People coming in. This is great. So right now we have like 51 people participating. We're looking for that to go up a little bit more. But just keep your hopes and your fears coming in, please. So it definitely helps us understand, what we have to deal with.
Mr. Roberts, why don't we give it about 2 more minutes and we'll get started, okay?
Perfect. I have another fear. Children are losing out on education and interaction with each other. Yes. So it sounds like, what Maker has to do is get some things to keep students interacting with each other. We're on that ball already. So it's good to see that we're on the same page for sure. But keep this coming in because we are at a crossroads here, people. We're going to need your input for sure. We definitely will. I just want to say during this time, I am so proud to be a Maker. I have other peers and friends that's teachers, and they are struggling, they are debating, they are arguing when we are definitely able to say what we feel and bring up the issues that we need to bring up to our administration. It's been actually refreshing, very refreshing. Proud to be a Maker because makers make it happen, and it's a clear fact, and you'll see that after today's meeting. Question: can I bring my student into the 5:30 call, yes, you definitely can. So you can hear what's going on with, or parents as well. You definitely can. You definitely invited to come back to 5:30, because I tell you this, we get better. The 5:30 meeting may be better because, every time you do this, it gets better. So you're welcome to come to the 5:30 meeting, definitely. Another fear: children are not disciplined enough to keep on top of their learning independently. Yes. I will tell you, self-regulation will need to be executed fully during these times. So Maker is willing to help you out with that as well. But I would, as parents, that's what I would focus on as well. Making sure my child can get up and get to that Zoom on time and so forth. Self-regulation is a number one tool in being successful as well. So let's get that going. All right. And
we ready, Mr.
I'm ready.
Ready to go?
Let's go.
Thank you for kicking us off, Mr. Roberts.
My pleasure.
So I just want to start off by welcoming everybody again. It was only a couple of weeks ago when we last had a chance to all talk together. And this morning I was meeting with my team trying to figure out how to share with everyone just all of the changes and news that have come, to schools and to parents and to students from, the federal government, the state government, from our local government, and trying to put plans into place that make sure that all of us are safe returning to school during this next school year. So I'm going to try my darndest over the next few minutes to sort of share with you in a coherent way what we're thinking right now. And I want to start by saying that it's different than what I spoke about a couple of weeks ago. Not drastically, but in some nuanced ways. If you joined us a couple of weeks ago, when we talked about what the student's experience in school was going to be, right? I said that there were two options, right? There's a remote option, and then there's this hybrid in-person option. And the way that I spoke about the remote option, which, just to be clear, is an option where the student stays home 100% of the time, right? The way that I spoke about that was that there wasn't going to be much interaction with the teachers and the staff at school, right? And that it might be even from like a third-party vendor, right? Where students were like learning their classwork and taking their lessons, but that it was really separate from the school experience that we know as Maker Academy. And when I think about that, right, that's not the experience that I would want to have for a student, right? Since then, like over the last 2 weeks, we've gotten additional guidance, like from the city, but also my team. I have to give a huge shout out to my team. They have been literally spending their full days and nights thinking about the way that we can do this effectively, to where students that are choosing a remote version of school can do that and still be a part of our community to the best that we can do. And I'm going to share my screen now. Liz, I think you might need to allow me to share. Awesome. I'm going to share. Oh. Can you all see the agenda for the day?
Yep.
Yep. Thank you. So I think that the thing that's really changed for me and for our team over the last couple of weeks is really the idea that health and safety needs to be a priority, and we really need to figure that out first in a way to make sure that everyone's safe, right? And that goes from students, all of our staff, principals, custodians, nurses, like everyone in our school building. And I think our goal for today, for this meeting, as we transition, I'm just going to read the top, as we transition the maker community this fall, right, we believe that the remote only version, at least to start with, is the safest option, right? And one of the reasons why I set up this meeting so quickly this week is that there is a survey that parents have the option to fill out by the end of this week that allows them to choose the remote only option. And we're going to spend some time now talking about why we think that, at least to begin with, is the safest option for our families. And so, like I mentioned, not just me, but literally 10 to 15 other staff members have been working on this plan for reopening. And we've come up with this sort of like mission statement to ground that work. And that is, UA Maker staff have taken significant time to interpret the New York City Department of Education's current guidelines for a safe reopening. In addition to these guidelines, UA Maker has developed its own set of prerequisites that we believe would make hybrid/in-learning learning safe. We believe until these conditions are met, remote learning is the safest option for your student and family. And what we're going to do right now for just a second is give you about a minute or so. We're going to do an activity that we do with our students at school. It's called Knows and Need to Knows, and it's an opportunity to be a little interactive. What we're going to do is I'm going to give you about a minute just to read this again to yourself, right? And then we're just going to ask you in the chat to actually write down, based off of this, what do you know, right, about Maker's mission statement at this point, right? And what questions do you have, or what need to knows do you still have? Again, we want to make sure that today you get as many questions answered as you can. So what we're going to do, I'm going to be quiet now and give about 30 seconds or so for folks just to read, right, this statement again, and in the chat, right, to write down both things that you know and things that you might need to know. And if you're ready, please go ahead and start typing in anything that you know or that you still need to know, just based off of that statement. Those will help guide our conversation over the next little bit.
Some great stuff coming in.
I'm going to give another 30 or 45 seconds for folks to type into the chat. So what Chad is doing on this next slide is just categorizing those questions that have been coming up for us.
And Clint is helping too.
Thank you. Any other Maker staff that wants to comb through can help dropping some things in there as well. So what we're going to do is we're not just going to answer all these questions right now, but I am going to take a few minutes to go through some additional slides that I think will answer a chunk of them, right? We will then come back at the end just to be able to cross off the ones that we think we've answered, and come back to ones that, you know, that we still either need to do more research on or we don't have an answer to. So I'm going to keep moving along, and then we'll come back to these and see how many we've answered. I'm going to go actually back into present. So besides those questions, right, that you all just answered, here's a few questions that my team and I've been thinking about that were part of what helped us shift our thinking, that starting off, at least in the fall in a remote setting, is the safest thing. So one question is, are students returning to school risking their health and safety more or less so than people throughout the city? Will my health and safety be secure if I go to school? What will happen if there's a case of COVID-19 in a school building? What will my lesson look like if I'm in person at school or versus a remote setting? Will I get a different, more interactive experience if I choose the hybrid in-person model? How will teachers teach students that are at home and in front of them at the same time, right? I can tell you that that is one that teachers and administrators are thinking a lot about right now, right? As you have groups of students in different places, how in the world are you supposed to actually do that, be able to do that effectively? So with all those questions, we've also thought a lot about, like, what is the actual purpose of coming into the school building, right? If a lot of the instruction or most is going to be done in a remote setting. This slide is hot off the press, right? Literally designed in the last 24 to 48 hours. It takes what we think are a lot of these factors and gives us a framework and some guiding principles. So the first one is just clearly, like, our focus right now is on the health and safety. It's our highest priority. You know, we know that there's risks in terms of coming back to school. And right now, the information that we've gotten from the Department of Education really doesn't guarantee, like, anyone's safety. And I think that it's taken me a while to be able just to say that. But, like, you know, right now, like, there's not a great way to guarantee that someone wouldn't get COVID by coming back into the school. You know, there's also very little data, right? That's out there. There's school districts across the country that are opening back up, you know, right now. And we don't, you know, there's cases on the news where people are getting sick. But we need to be able, within Maker and within New York City schools, to be able to quickly get data about the impacts of our decisions on when we're bringing students back into school. And right now, the Department of Education's plan is just to kind of open schools, right? And allow about 50% of students back in and hope for the best. And I just don't think that that's a very safe or healthy way to approach this. We also know that this can't just be like Luke and a small group of teachers making this plan, which is the reason why we're committed to continuing to have these meetings with parents and students, so that we can make sure that you know, we're getting feedback from our community. and acknowledging that the plan will likely continue to change and to evolve, over the course of the, fall. So with health and safety being our #1 concern, I wanted to sort of like paint a picture for you, right, of what a school day with students coming into the building would look like, right? And this kind of answers the question about like, what are some of the guidelines from the city about what the hybrid in-person model looks like. So first of all, right, everyone will be getting to school somehow, right? Whether that's taking the train or the bus or walking to school. And I know that there's some inherent risks, obviously, in taking those different modes of transportation. We know from our analysis that we can put about 10 to 13 students, or I should just say people, including the teachers, in a classroom, right? That's dependent upon the size of a classroom and based off the CDC guidelines of 65 square feet per person. We know that students have to maintain that bubble, right? Which means that there's rows of students in desks that are at least 6 feet apart, and they are not coming into close contact with each other, right? Everyone's wearing, everyone's practicing social distancing. Everyone's wearing a mask 100% of the time. With our building size and our floors, we could allow in, according to their guidance, about 200 to 240 students at any particular time. The DOE has said that if there's 2 cases of COVID that are found inside a building, not just in a school, right? Because we have 4 schools inside our building, that there would be a closure of the building while a team of people would come in and do an analysis to figure out whether the building needs to be shut down over the course of, for some amount of time, for people to quarantine. Because of all of that, right, this is the biggest change I think that I've had, is that, in person is not the in-person like we knew it in the past. I was even talking to my own daughter, who's going into 6th grade, last night about this idea. I've talked to some of the parents from Maker over the last few days. I've heard from students that say, I'm really excited because I want to come back and see my friends, and I want to do clubs, and I want that social interaction that we've been missing for the last 5 months. But that's not going to happen, in the same way. This fall, for families that choose the hybrid in-person model, though all those social distancing requirements have to stay in place. So our recommendation is to fill out the survey for remote if it's within your capacity, right? I acknowledge that everyone's family situation is different, right? And there might be some reasons, some very valid reasons why you need your student to come to school, right? And we value that, and the building will be open, right? As long as nothing else crazy happens, right? There will be teachers here, and that will be an option. However, I just think it's really important to note that it's not gonna look and feel the same, right? We can't 100% guarantee everyone's health and safety. Students won't be changing classrooms, right? They're not going to be following you're in room 425 and then you go to room 430 and then you go to room 433, right? Because that just continues to increase the number of different people they come in contact with, right? So under our model, students will be assigned to a room, right? And then they will be engaging in their classes, right? On their computer, right? Along with some students that might be at home or might be in another classroom. One thing that hasn't changed, right, is that our teachers will work with about 60 students at a time, right, for about 8 to 10 weeks, right? So our class sizes we're shooting for to be around 20, right? And that those would be some students that are in person and some students that are remote. One of the benefits to that is if there are some cases of COVID and the school needs to shut down, we can really quickly pivot to a remote only option without blowing up our entire schedule. I know one question that's come up is like, can we switch during the school year? If we start off remote, right, could we opt into the hybrid model later on, right? And the DOE said that there's going to be 4 times throughout the year where families can change and go from the remote into the, into the hybrid or in-person model, right? We don't know the dates of those, but I think we could assume, right, that if you start off in a hybrid model, that would be basically September and October. And then somewhere in November would be an opportunity to switch to a hybrid model. Families can at any point jump from the hybrid model to the remote model, right? Because that's just the same thing as staying home. But again, because of all of those different, those different possibilities, having one schedule that works for all of those makes it the easiest to program and to remain consistent depending on changes in, COVID rates and whether the schools might have to shut down. So we're sort of back to the same slide that we showed a couple weeks ago. The first option, right, is the remote learning option. And that's to, again, have your students stay home, but still engage in classes with teachers from Maker and with other kids from Maker. If you're going to choose this option, it's important to know that there will be live instruction, right? There'll be an expectation that students are, Zooming in and joining a live class on their computer so that they can do discussions and they can do feedback to each other and they can engage with their teachers. If you are going to choose that one, I know that there's a link that's been dropped in the chat a couple of times. That's something that you do have to fill out by this Friday. So Friday the 7th. If you choose the second option, you don't have to do anything, right? So that is the in-person remote option. There's no action that's needed. We are waiting to get the numbers back from the survey so that we can finalize our schedule. So once we know how many families are choosing the remote option, we'll be able to better put together the class schedule so that we can share that information, right? We're definitely acknowledging that that's happening a lot later this year, not just at Maker, but across, I think every school in New York City, as it would. At this point, right, I want to kind of open it up. And if you have any questions, concerns, thoughts, feelings, you can type them in the chat. So I'm going to give a minute or so for that. If anyone wants to unmute themselves and ask a question over this, I think that that's fine as well.
Good afternoon, everyone. I have a question. My family would like to choose the in-person remote learning. My child is a new incoming student to UMaker, so I'd rather for him to do some form of in-person learning. So do I have to fill that form out, or I don't need to fill that form out?
Nope, you don't need to fill it out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello, good afternoon. I also have a question. Oh, I just forgot it. Oh my God. It slipped my mind that fast. Let me think about it and I'll come back.
Totally fine.
Definitely understand.
Greetings, everyone. I have just a quick question. If my child, of course, he's an incoming freshman, if I was to decide fully remote, would he be in a class with other incoming freshmen, or would it just be like a mixture and work is being assigned? What would that look like?
That's a good question. So most freshmen follow a similar set of classes. right? And so for the most part, they would be in classes with other freshmen, right? And if your child was at home, right, they would be, in a Zoom call, maybe like this with fewer people, right? And some of those students might be at their homes, right? Or some of them might also be here at school, right? But on their computer.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I got my question. So
Go.
as far as face masks, I know if the students are present in the school, I know that a lot of children are going to have a hard time keeping their masks on and remaining distant for a long period of time. Are there going to be any consequences if they don't follow rules? How is that going to work?
That is a question that principals have also been waiting to hear. I do know that Chancellor Carranza yesterday, right, during a press conference, said that students that weren't following safety guidelines would be sent home, right, and not allowed to return until they were able to do that. So that was as of last night. So that actually seems pretty clear in terms of what would happen there. Yeah. But I do think choosing that in-person model, right? Like the adults, the principal, the students, like everyone is wearing a mask for the entirety of the day.
I have a question. My son is going into the 10th grade, and I totally get the remote reasonings. Are there going to be any opportunities, or is UA Maker thinking about, he was in video game club, would more of these clubs go online? I think video game club is probably the easiest one to do, but is UA Maker thinking about like how to engage kids in these clubs that they so much, particularly my son?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think that, I'll just speak for myself. I didn't go to high school for my calculus class, right? Like that is not what got me up in the morning to like show up, right? I loved sports. Video games were like way older then, but they were still super cool. And I loved those things as well. And so, yeah, like we're thinking a lot about that. I would say that it's not our number one thought process right now, right? Like we've been really focused on trying to like give clear information and like help give guidance to families. But yeah, like Mr. Roberts, Ashley, other folks that have led clubs in the past, like I know that they've been thinking about how we can keep that big part of our community intact for this year. Yeah.
Great.
Absolutely. Ashley and myself, we oversee the after school program, and that's been a main concern of ours of how to get these extracurricular activities back in the virtual state.
Yeah.
But like you said, video gaming is the easiest because the students already know how to do it. They're already doing it at nights, so that would be the easiest. But definitely understand your concern about that because we're trying to bring the normalcy back. But
Exactly.
I'm afraid that with safety being such a priority, just being in the building and doing that is like literally impossible right at this moment to be safe.
Great.
Anyone that's been monitoring chat, are there
sorry.
other questions in there?
May I pose my question?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The survey that you guys have linked in the chat, is that the same survey that we filled out? Because I think I filled out this survey a number of times and I always say the same thing. I'm going remote and that's all there is to it.
Yeah, that survey remained the same. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So no need for me to fill it out again.
Yeah, the reason we keep putting it in there is we don't see the results. So like, I don't know if like 3 parents have filled it out or like 400 have filled it out.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you for that.
Yeah, of course.
Luke, there's a question in the chat about scheduling for people who are completely remote in terms of, will it be a full schedule? Will it be synchronous, asynchronous?
Yeah, so we're working on several different iterations of like an actual bell schedule. The things that we know are that if you're fully remote, there will be some parts that are what they call synchronous, which just means that there will be some live instruction, right? So like what we know is that there were a good chunk of students last spring that did their work from say 9, 10 o'clock at night until 2 or 3 in the morning, and then slept through what were like the classes during the day. And I say that somewhat in a humorous tone, but like because it was real, but we know that that's not what's best for teenagers. And so we are working to like raise the expectations for kids, but also for our teachers, right? To like be creating lessons and activities that are engaging, right? Like it's actually not that exciting to like log on to a class every day if your teacher is just gonna like lecture and give you notes, right? Like those are things that you could just get emailed to you, read, and then have a discussion about. So like we're doing some things on our end to make it more engaging, but also we're gonna expect and have a contract, right? That has some requirements for students to say that they're, you know, gonna be with us and you know, log into those meetings.
I see that there's a question from Shannon Barber. Shannon, if you on, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
For the incoming freshmen who are doing remote learning, are there going to be activities for them to make friendships and get to know each other? Because I mean, I know for my daughter, at least nobody else from her middle school is going to make her. So she'll be coming in not knowing anybody.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I don't want to put anyone out, but I'm wondering, Margarita, would you want to like share for just a second, like some of the ideas that the advisory teams are thinking about in terms of like bringing students back together, you know, over the first couple weeks of September?
Yeah, sure. It's a great question, especially for incoming freshman families and students. We're actively thinking about that right now, and the advisory committee and teams are thinking about this and planning specifically a few week-long series of activities, particularly in advisory. So at least your students, you'll know, will have a community to start with and a relationship with their advisories to start with, and then they can essentially continue to build on that with other students in other classes that they have and that they'll start to share. But definitely there will be some kind of sort of series of welcome back engaging into the community, especially for incoming freshmen. And they'll have sort of like one-on-ones with their advisors as well. So definitely stay tuned for that.
You know, I'm starting to hear this overall tone of, which is understandable. You know, and overall we want to get back to normal. And I'm gonna tell you, I always got a kick at the beginning of the year meeting the new freshmen. But I will have to tell you that it's just not going to be the same. It's, you know, the good morning, the handshakes, the little grips with the quick hugs, the one-on-one, the celebrations, Hispanic Heritage Month, Black History Month. We were also including Muslim celebration, Asian Pacific celebrations. You know, it just won't be the same. And it definitely, if anyone wanted to go back to normalcy, it was me. But, you know, I'm so specific about my safety. I'm so specific about making sure people are safe. It bothers me to have to, you know, to decide on the side of remote learning, because I was one who wanted to get back. But I feel for you freshmen that's coming in, because you want that experience. But we're going to do our best to have that same experience, but virtual. I will be zooming into all these advisory meetings. I will be reaching out to freshmen one-on-one. We're going to do our best to make it, you know, normal as possible. But safety is an issue, and Maker, we've always prided ourselves on being safe. And at this moment in time, what the city is requesting is just doesn't seem to be safe at all.
Yeah.
But parents, students, teachers, we are the core of any community. So just letting you know, the power definitely is with us.
Yeah. And just to add on, I don't know that I could say it better than Mr. Roberts just did right there, but I mean, I'm actually here right now in school. I'm like waiting for people to show back up. Like I keep waiting. I'm like, the bell just rang if you heard it, right? Like I want to see kids in the hallway. I want to see teachers stopping by, right? Like that's, I don't know that any of us got into public education, at least at the time, for like a remote learning experience, right? Like we are social people, right? Like we love kids. That's the reason that we do this. But it's going to be different, at least for a while. And I think that it's a really helpful frame to be thinking, like, no one is saying that it's going to be like this for the next year. We also just don't know, right? Like what it's going to be like. And we are really keeping health and safety as like our number one priority to start with. And followed right up by that, both like community and then, obviously student learning. I do want to go back, because I said I would, just to the need to knows to see if we'd answered them, right? So these were the ones that came about at the beginning. The first one was just, do you have to take the survey if you plan to do hybrid learning, right? Can I see some like head nods for like what the answer to that question is? Do you have to take the survey if you plan to do hybrid learning? The answer is no, right? You don't have to do anything, right? It's only the survey if you're choosing the remote. Can we change our mind if it's not working for our family? And the answer is yes, right? So there's going to be 4 times, dates to be determined by the DOE, right? Where there will be, I assume, another survey where you can like opt back in, right? If you start remote, to then coming back to the hybrid in-person model. I think by that time, we'll also just have more data about like what's working and what's not working, right? So that people have an idea of what it's like on the ground here at school each day. I'm going to come back to the maker prerequisites, because we're going to invite some folks, if they want to stay on after this call, to sort of like go a little bit deeper into our reopening plan that we're preparing to pitch to the city and to other urban assembly schools across the city. So I'll come back to that. Another question, was this tentative for the fall semester only? I think the answer is like yes, right? Like we're going to keep sort of analyzing and looking at the information and continuing to make plans, according to that. Is there a goal date for when you would like to move to blended learning? I mean, the answer is like as soon as possible, right? Like I do think that like getting kids and adults safely back into the building is what we're all shooting for. And there was a question about regents as well. What plan do you have for the regents exam? They haven't canceled the regents for January and June. So I think we're waiting to sort of hear. I know teachers are waiting. It definitely impacts in some ways the content that they teach, right? If there is a large state exam, sort of that culminates that. So again, I don't know that that's the number one thing that people are thinking about at the state level right now, but hopefully they will soon. Before we go, I just want to give it one last shot if there's any other questions that folks have.
Hi, I have, so I had originally said I wanted my son to do blended learning, and he would, he's been looking forward to being able to go to school and stuff. But what I'm hearing from you is that essentially come September, whether they're staying at home and doing remote learning or going into school, they're still doing the exact same thing of remote learning, except just sitting in a classroom with a computer in front of them.
Yes,
that's correct.
That's correct. So it really doesn't matter. So that whole blended learning idea is not going to happen for September.
That's correct.
I'm asking because some of it is I'm taking like the information that you're giving me and relaying it to, because I'm a teacher also, so relaying it to our school and things that they should be thinking about also.
Yeah, and so I think that's a really great summary, right, of what we're doing. Have to acknowledge that, again, every school in the city has been charged with figuring this out, right? There are some guidance and guidelines, but they don't really get to the specificity that we need to be able to execute them. And so I've just felt like we couldn't wait longer to like make a call on what we're going to do, at least for the first couple months of school, right? Again, I'm not saying that we're going remote only for the whole year. Like that's not what we're saying. But I just, for our teachers' sake, like they are like ready to start planning, but they don't know what they're planning for. So we needed to be able to like make some calls.
Well, even as a parent, it's very, I do really appreciate that you're saying, okay, this is just what we're going to do at this point. Because it's hard, even, you know, as a parent and as a student, on knowing what they're, you know, he's a freshman, this is his first year going into high school. It's supposed to be, you know, exciting and everything. And I know everyone is, we're all thinking, oh my God, what is our child going to be losing out on?
Yeah.
So, and then how are we going to make it better? Right. Yeah. So, and thank you very much. I do appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah.
Can I add something, Luke?
Yeah.
I just think, so we had actually hoped to get feedback on some of what we're thinking should be prerequisites for what a safe reopening would look like for all students. So I'm wondering if like we could gauge how many people are able to like stay and perhaps like transition to giving feedback on that document.
Yeah, I think that that's a really, like it's a really good idea. And just to like add on a little bit, so like on top of what we just shared, right? And I do just want to reiterate, filling out the survey if you can, right? Like is like the most helpful thing right now. But our team has also been building a plan out for, you know, if it's not safe to return on September 8th or whenever school starts, how would we know when it is? And like, how would we know when it is for our community, not just from like Governor Cuomo or like Mayor de Blasio saying that it's like ready for the entire city or state. So we've developed a very comprehensive plan that started off as a plan to help guide maker. But I really think it's at a place that it could help make policy decisions for the city. And so now I'm just echoing what Ivy said, but if you'd like to, right? So I think two things. One, you can sign off right now and we can do the Zoom wave, right? That everyone does, which is like, bye, see you later. Like that's the main part of the presentation, but we would love for folks to stay and hear for maybe 15 or 20 minutes about some advocacy work that we are imminently getting ready to share with the city. We would love to be able to have feedback from parents about that before we just go rogue and do it ourselves. So I'm gonna say goodbye to those that need to go, right? If you wanna stay, maybe we'll have like a minute transition here or so, and then I'll turn it over to some other folks to help us to walk us through that plan.
So Luke, I want to make sure I want to hear from the parents who are also interested in the blended learning as well, because we want to know what needs they have. It's important for us to be able to accommodate everybody, regardless what you've chosen. Although we are asking that everyone go remote, I know there's needs for some people just cannot. So we want to be sensitive and respectful and be knowledgeable of what those needs are so we can help you as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would also just add that if you have more individual concerns about your child, please don't hesitate to reach out. Like I hope you stay on this call and share some of your feedback, but myself and Chad and Luke and our leadership team, we are here that if you want to have a private call or conversation, please just reach out to us.
I just put our email address in the chat, which is leadership@uamaker.nyc.
Flavia has her hand up.
Yes. Hello, everyone, and thank you for having the meeting to give up the update about the progress and plans for September. So my question is sort of a question, or actually it's not a question, it's more of a possible idea and concern. So during the heat of the pandemic, as I wrote in the note, I had to work, and of course my kids had to be home. They had to do the virtual, which obviously didn't work, given him needing the reinforcement of you need to get on class, But because it was like they gave the homework, you had the week to turn it in, there was no schedule. He didn't do any homework. So summer school was recommended. Now, it was recommended, but I implemented it because I said, he needs it. He needs some structure. Maybe this will help him so that when September comes, if they're actually having virtual, this will be a good thing. And one of the things that has taken a little while to get used to is the fact that he has to be on time every time. He has a schedule for every class and he has to be on time. And I think that's the best thing that has happened for the summer, because I also think it is something that's going to help him for September. Although I chose the hybrid, but for the days that I have to return to work because I took the summer off to be able to help him focus with this, that he at least is now implementing that pattern to be able to get on class and knowing that it's attendance, your presence matters, you have to be on, you cannot be late, because it's the same as if he was walking in the hallway and didn't get to class on time. So if that is something that your staff takes into consideration, then, if it has to be, which again, I still choose the hybrid, that's what I want, but I understand the concerns and I understand why starting off with remote would be best until things clear up and things get better, and then the hybrid could be implemented. And hopefully maybe by the end of the year, everybody could be in class. That would be great.
Yeah.
But that's something that I just want to point out there, because I know that my son just constantly needs that bringing back, because he constantly gets distracted. If he's not interested. If he's interested, he's all gung-ho 100%. But if he gets bored, then it's like, okay, well, you know what? I'm no longer interested. So that's just something to put out there, that at least that attendance and having that schedule makes a huge difference.
Yeah. And I'll just echo that I agree with everything that you said. And our plans are to have just more strict rules and guidelines for tuning in, right? And that those lessons are live, at least parts of them are live, and there's a schedule to follow, right? And that it won't be okay to basically be absent, right? And just try to do the work, for what we saw a lot of kids in the middle of the night, right? Then kids would be upset why their teachers weren't replying to their emails or texts at 2 in the morning. They were appalled that their teachers weren't awake. So we know that there needs to be, again, more strict rules for students, but also for teachers. Again, the work, kids earlier this week said, I don't want to be bored.
Yes.
Right? When I zoom in, right? So that's a great challenge for not only us, but other educators to really rethink, right? We can't stare at Zoom screens for 6 hours. So if you have them for 20 minutes and then get them working on something, what's the most impactful 20 minutes, right? What are you going to do during that time to get kids' interest peaked and get them started really thinking about something?
I can tell you one of the things that one of the teachers for the summer school implemented, which was Sudoku, and not just for math. And that was definitely something that my son was all gung-ho about. He was very interested and excited about it. And he does not like ELA, but he was excited about it because of Sudoku. Cool. So that's something your staff can definitely take into account and apply the material into things that maybe students can find competition with, or maybe something where they're involved. That's definitely going to work, because although it was a challenge to get him on time every time, but for certain classes, I didn't have to tell him anything because he was excited about it. There was a competition and he was learning in the same process. So that's just something that you guys can use.
Yeah.
Flavia, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
This is the type of information we need, but there are many kids that will need little specifics. So it's important that you guys reach out, because many of us as at Maker are not not offset by making personal phone calls to see if your kid is up, myself included. So what I'm gonna do now is put my email in the chat.
Okay.
I would like to know who your child is. And if for any other parents that are still listening, this is the type of stuff we need to know to increase the engagement with the virtual remote learning, for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So at this point, I'm going to turn it over. Maddie, Shreya, team, are you ready to walk us through sort of this next part?
Yes.
Awesome.
Do it.
So we have been working as a reopening team on how to safely reopen and how will we know. And we've looked at sort of a phased model looking at the way New York City has been reopening. Just as a general context and framework for this work, as a staff, we recognize the way that COVID-19 has highlighted racial and economic disparities, and we think that our reopening plan needs to account for that and hold really high safety and health standards for the community that we serve. We already looked at the problem statements and guiding principles, but basically all parts of our plan point back to a health focus, being data-driven, and being community-owned. This proposal we're like trying to push out to the city more broadly, so this is just about like how different schools may adapt it.
Just interrupt.
Can you make this full screen?
Yes. Yes. Okay. So I'm just gonna run through like an overview of like our current plan, which is to have 4 different phases for when we come back to the building. Phase 0 is a pre-opening phase where staff run 2 simulated school days where we see how is it to wear a mask in one classroom and like maintain social distancing, what works about our assumptions and our plans and what doesn't, so that we can make adjustments before students come. Then we hope to run a pilot phase where 2 cohorts of 10 students on alternating days, so 10 kids in the building per day, come and we see what about our plans work and what do we need to adjust before we bring a lot of students back into this space. After that, we would move on to a 1 grade phase and looking towards the freshmen as the first grade to bring back because they haven't been in our building yet and they haven't met each other yet. So we would like to bring the freshmen back in phase 2. And this would allow us to test our hybrid model with an entire grade in the building. We're still incrementally building who is in the building, but being able to test it with a full grade. And then phase 3 would be adding an additional grade per week for 3 weeks until at the end of phase 3, all students would be phased into the hybrid model. So this is like a phased plan that gets us to the point that the DOE is asking us to start with. And to be just like very transparent, there are places where our plan is different from what the DOE is currently saying. This is sort of like a graphic that explains the flow of the plan. So we have some prerequisites that I'll share with you in a second, which are things that have to happen before anyone steps foot in the building. When they're met, we move to phase 0. When we then meet phase 0 and have met all of the checkpoint items, we would move to phase 1. We would try phase 1. If we meet all of our checkpoint items, we would move to phase 2. Likewise, until we get to the full hybrid model. But at any point, if we fail our checkpoints, meaning health and safety indicators are changing, and I'll show you what some of those that we've drafted are, we revert to remote only. So this is a lot of text on a slide. This is meant more for like reading material than like a presentation, but some prerequisites and non-negotiables before anyone comes into the building is proactive PPE distribution, meaning PPE gets distributed before students get on public transportation. We've seen a lot about ventilation. So we need our ventilation system to be fully operational and equipped with new filters shown to filter out COVID particles and operating 24 hours a day. This is based on health professionals' recommendations to our plan, the piece about ventilation. And then some things about like safe protocols to react to cases in our community, tracing, testing, updated discipline policy in which consequences for not wearing masks don't contribute to the school to prison pipeline, meaning like revert to remote learning, don't suspend kids. We need, and this is, I think, like a big point of divergence from the DOE plan, our plans need to be at least as safe as CDC guidelines for schools and the current phase guidance for New York City, so that our school is not a first testing ground for a new policy. What we mean by this is the current DOE plan, for example, is to have lunch in a classroom while indoor dining is still postponed across New York City. So if indoor dining is postponed across New York City, then indoor dining would also be postponed in our schools. We also don't want families or students who opt into remote learning to be disadvantaged by doing so. And we want everyone to have a choice about whether they're remote or in person. We need community health and well-being assessment of New York indicators and school indicators to be at the core of plans. And we need anyone tasked with extra work to keep our schools clean and healthy to be paid fairly for their time. This is like a list of sort of prerequisites that's grown as we get more community buy-in. I'm gonna pause here because that was a lot of information before we take a look at what a phase and checkpoint might look like to see if there's concerns about this, questions about this, feedback about this so far.
I have a question. Apologize if this has been covered already. Are students going to have to take are there going to be temperature checks as they enter? Because I know with my building we're doing that.
So
okay,
go ahead.
So there's not going to be temperature checks for they're calling them random temperature checks, which I don't know if you guys see how ironic that is, but random temperature checks is what they're planning to have. So I don't know how they're going to choose who's going to be, whose temperature is going to check. I don't know if there's no description of who or why you would randomly grab the person. So again, that's to me another example of how our safety is still at risk.
No, and I would say in this plan, like what we're proposing, it is different from current guidance and plans, but under this plan, we're saying daily temperature checks need to occur every day at arrival. That is one of the things that will allow us to move to the next checkpoint. So yeah, that is definitely something that we are thinking about and is on our radar and we think is important.
Great, thank you.
Yes. Other questions, comments, concerns, feedback?
Is hybrid learning different than being in the classroom and working on a computer? No.
No, and this prerequisite here of number 6, sorry, families and students who opt into fully remote learning are not disadvantaged by doing so. That is sort of like where that shift is coming from. There are a variety of reasons people may choose to stay remote. And as we tried to differentiate what happens in hybrid, like what happens in person versus remote for those students, we realized that remote only students will be put at a disadvantage if we differentiate those days, which becomes an equity issue.
Well, I believe in total that this is a safety issue and an equity issue. And I'll put equity in because, it's a fact that Black and brown people catch coronavirus 5 times more than anybody else. So with most of our population looking like that, it's just absolutely not equitable and it's absolutely unsafe.
I also want to jump in and say, hi, I'm Shreya. I'm a 9th grade teacher at Maker. And I know that there are a lot of 9th grade parents on this call who are really concerned about making sure students have a fantastic 9th grade year. And one of the reasons why 9th grade teachers are so concerned about all of this is we really want to get into planning curriculum and planning the activities and the incredible ways that we can have student interactions and give 9th graders an amazing welcome to Maker. And so the sooner we can feel safe about what Maker will look like in the fall, the sooner we can start planning all of the things and all of the reasons why we signed up to be teachers. And so if your student is remote only, we are going to work super hard to ensure that that is a great experience for your student and that we can have incredible opportunities for bonding and for emotional connections and for friendships as much as we can in this time.
I'm sorry, can I ask a question? Because I'm still really, I'm just getting confused in regards to how you're talking about this with the hybrid model. So you keep reassuring that students who are doing 100% remote learning are going to get the same benefits as the students who are coming into the classroom. And but I'm like, I keep questioning, is what's going on in the classroom if you're going in physically into the building? My understanding is they're just sitting there with the computer, so they're really doing remote learning, but in the school.
That is correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And it is not, we don't even know at this moment if they would be sitting with the teacher whose classwork they are doing. They are coming to Maker, being given a computer, sitting in a room and doing remote work.
Okay, and then in terms of, oh, I just lost my train of thought, I think. So that in terms of this model that you're talking about, or the, you know, the different phases and stuff, it still is where these students are just, you're just doing these phases to get to the point so that students can be in the building and still just be doing remote learning?
So we're talking about starting the year with remote, and as we phase in, I think it's important to not disadvantage folks who have opted to fully remote. As we look through our phases, the goal would be that we would be getting enough indicators that like then we could fully transition to hybrid. If all students are able to transition to fully hybrid, then it becomes a different conversation about equity and fairness.
Okay, so then in terms of starting these phases, right, are you planning on starting that? I know you said that starting it when these prerequisites are met. So you're not thinking that starting day one of school, you're going to be starting phase 0 necessarily?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
This is a plan that sort of, it says we should start remote, but we should be planning for how we phase in. And like many people have said before me, like this is not just a plan that we hope will be for Maker, but that like hopefully takes off across the city, because some of these things can't, like it's impossible for Maker to implement them on our own.
Yeah. I mean, I think just to like jump in, like the part, like there's a lot of parts to this plan, which makes it great. But like the part that like continues to stick out for me is the fact that I'm just really worried about on September 8th or 10th, whenever schools start, that even, you know, half of the 1.1 million kids come to school, and then within 2 weeks, the whole thing shut down anyways. Like I mean, it's happening all across the country, right? As some schools in like the Midwest and the South are like opening up right now. That's just really, it just seems like a silly plan to like do that right at the beginning. And so I think having some clear indicators for what would allow us to bring people back safely is like the part of the plan that like jumps out to me, and I think is the part that I hope other schools and people further higher up than me, like in the DOE, will latch onto and at least be able to help make some changes between now and the 1st of September.
We have created these slides for every phase, sort of like when, who, what, and then checkpoints. So at the end of each phase, we would then go through and check each of these buckets around New York City health indicators, Maker health indicators, physical space, community feedback, curriculum, and schedule. And if we pass by checking all of these things off, we would continue to the next phase, which would mean bringing more people into the building. So the sort of goal is to be continuously monitoring, continuously getting feedback about what's working and what needs to change, so that we can keep people safe and keep the learning experiences as strong as possible at the same time. I think it doesn't make sense for me to like read every indicator. But if certain things are jumping out to you from sort of where we're thinking, or you have questions about any of these.
This is Flavia. I have a question.
Who wants to go? You want to go first? Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So my question is, when you mentioned that even if the students are coming into school, they'll get a computer and they'll still be learning virtual, is that something set in stone or is that an idea?
I'm happy to take that one. So I think that our plan right now is that would be the plan for this fall to start with.
So even if it's hybrid, the teacher will not be in school and the students will all come to, the ones that opt for coming into school will be sitting there with a computer learning virtually.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
My question is there anything that we can do as parents? Because I know you mentioned that it's hard to implement your plan if it's not something that's going to happen across the board. Is there anything as parents that we can do to help shift it to that direction? Is maybe sign a petition or something of that nature? Because, you know, we do want, it would be great if they do that across the entire city. I mean, that's the most intelligent thing that I can think of.
I just, in the chat, put down a form. If any parents are interested in signing on, we have written kind of a cover letter. I'm wondering, Maddie, do we want to put the link of that in the chat as well, or we can email it out after this? But we've put together a cover letter kind of outlining what the purpose of our plan is and what we hope to achieve by it. And we are trying to collect signatures. So part of the reason for this presentation was actually to gather community support for the plan. And then we hope to send it out to our union and to the DOE and to the mayor's office, as well as state officials and other teacher networks. And once we send it out, you all are free to, of course, send it to your personal networks as well to really gather momentum around this and push for a citywide plan that can keep all of us safe.
Okay, so that's in the chat. The link is in the chat?
Yes.
Okay.
Makers, make it happen. I just had to throw that in there real quick.
You had, in that slide that showed like the checklist of things that need to be done, there was something that said about lunch, where you would eat, students would be able to eat lunch. Here, hold on 1 minute. A safe lunch plan. Oh, you just moved it.
Sorry.
Okay, that's all right. A safe lunch plan that does not require students to remove masks indoors is in place and working. Meaning that they would keep their masks on while they're eating? Like what are you thinking that looks like?
So some ideas we've thrown around would be out lunch only, so go outside to eat. Like move the schedule so that lunch is not part of the school day and kids just like leave. There's been a few ideas tossed around, but the big idea of this checkpoint is if indoor dining is not allowed in New York City for safety concerns, then it should not be allowed in schools.
Yeah, I agree.
There's a lot of evidence about COVID being airborne, and our classrooms are going to have the same 10 kids sitting in them the whole time. Those kids take off their masks to eat. Like it's a really big risk. A lot of our classrooms don't have windows. We're just really worried about any time kids would be without masks.
So in regards to that, does that mean that the parents will be compensated financially to be able to provide lunch for their children since they're not going to be eating at school?
I imagine if it, and somebody else please jump in if this is not correct, but if it was like out lunch or something, we would have like a grab and go from the cafeteria instead of go through a cafeteria line.
Yeah, that's correct. Like there would still be school lunch each day. It would likely be like a grab and go like type of a situation, which is, yeah, that's what it would also be the same way for breakfast too.
So that also means then what, that the school day would be shorter, or that they would have to wait until the school closed at 2:30 so that they can eat?
It's a good question. So the city has said that the school day is going to be shorter, right? Like they've said that it's 5 hours and 30 minutes, which it's normally about an hour longer than that. So the school year this year, it is going to be, it's going to be a shorter amount of time that students are inside the actual building for students that choose the hybrid in-person model. So I think that we are trying to work, a schedule out that that just puts all these factors into place. And then we're also working with the 3 other schools that are in our building, right, to like lay those plans on top of ours, right, to like make sure that kids aren't all leaving at the same time, right, or not all like walking in the same doors at the same time, not using the same stairwells and elevators as each other as well.
I have some feedback too. I think in order for us to help spread the word, I think the deck is extremely comprehensive and it should be, but I think what would be helpful for us, and so we can tell other parents in the New York City School District, even if you lay out like the top 3 to 5 bullet points that we're proposing, I think that's way more digestible, because even if you send a link, people aren't gonna, they're not gonna read it. And I think it's much easier to get quicker feedback, like here's 3 things that you need to know that we're proposing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've put together a cover letter, which kind of has a quick Spark Notes. Do people still use Spark Notes? Spark Notes version of the slide deck of like, here's just like a 1 to 2 sentence blurb of what it's looking like, and also a little bit more behind like, why do we feel like a phased reopening is necessary? Here's what it would look like. If you're interested, you can see the full proposal here. So I think we're just doing final edits on that letter, and then we will send it out. I think when Luke sends out the PowerPoint and recording of this meeting, we might try and send that out then as well.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
We're gonna wait. We're also having this same meeting, or hopefully a closest version of this meeting at 5:30 for other families and students. And so once we're done with that, I've been recording this one just so that, again, even for families that can't be a part of either one, that they could also get the same information. But the goal is to start sending it out later tonight, unless we get any feedback that's like, this is a terrible idea and you should like stay far away from it. But I don't think I don't think we've heard that, at least so far.
I have a question in regards to like the implementation of the curriculum and stuff. So I know being a teacher myself, I think the biggest challenge going remotely was really being able to get the students to rise to the challenge, right? I had a few unexpected students who did, who couldn't rise to the challenge in the building, but were unbelievable remotely. But that was really very few. So my question, because it's something I'm grappling with, is like, how are you going to be doing this remote teaching and still be able to have that rigorous lesson, the rigorous learning that's going on, and making sure that it's really going on?
I've got a two-part answer to that, but then I definitely open it up to teachers as well. The first thing is that one of the reasons why we think it didn't work as well as it could have last spring was that students were still focused on like all of their courses, right? And so we have made a decision, sort of like regardless of where all this lands, that students are just going to focus on 3 or 4 courses to start with. That also means that teachers are focusing on about half the number of students that they normally would, right? So if a teacher normally has 4 sections of 25 to 30 kids, right? Like that's between 100 and 120 students. This model allows them to be focusing on 60 kids at one point. So I think that like just the the lessening of like the load will be one thing that will allow teachers to give more like one-on-one and small group, interactions, and being able to communicate better with families and students is one thing. The other thing is like, we have a committee that's working on like rethinking how we teach, right? Like you cannot teach the same way that you have when you're in person, right? If you do, it's going to fail, right? So like, we know that after about 15 or 20 minutes, adults even, like let alone 14-year-olds, right, stop listening, right? Like, and so if you've got them for 10 or 15 minutes, right, like we're starting to work on, right, what are those actual strategies? Like how do you get kids to engage, in the moment like that? And so we're getting some good work so far, with that. Like, just to be like honest, like there's one strategy that like I saw the other day that's like, maybe every student gets like one of those little whiteboards. This is not a whiteboard, this is a piece of paper, right? But like everyone has a whiteboard, right? And if you can set a norm that everyone's camera is on, right? Which I can acknowledge can be tricky depending on Wi-Fi connections, but like there can be an expectation that there's a question and then every kid on 3 holds up their whiteboard, right? With a drawing, with a picture, with a word, with a math problem, with like whatever the thing is. And like, you wouldn't probably normally do that in a classroom. Maybe you would, right? But it's just like a different way. And like a teacher can say, oh, I got 18 out of 20 students to like have their camera on and hold it up. Those 2 kids I should follow up with after to find out what was going on. Like, were they helping a little brother or sister with their math work, right? Like, that's what my own daughter might be doing this fall, right? Is helping my son who's in 2nd grade figure out Zoom, right? So like, that's a valid reason maybe to not have your camera on. But if they're just if my daughter's just being apathetic, right? That's like a different conversation to have to try to like help them engage. Those are just my 2 thoughts sort of like, at the beginning.
I have a question. So what if they're in the middle of a lesson and they have a question right then and there? And, are they going to be able to ask the question, or do they have to wait, like write it down and have to wait? Because, when you're in the middle of the process and you have that question right then and there, are they going to be able to say, I have a question, like how we're doing now? I have a question, and you say what you have to say and you get it answered.
Yep.
Is that something that's going to happen?
Yeah, the answer is yes, right? And like the reason that that's a yes is because I know there's 32 people on this call right now, but like I can see on my grid screen like 25 at one point, and our classes would be even smaller than that, right? So we would be able to engage, in a similar way to this. The part that I don't think the DOE has thought about is like, if I'm the teacher, Luke Bauer, right? And I have, let's say 10 of you on a screen, but I have the other 10 here in my office, then I have to be like, I'm going to be back in a little bit and like wheel away, and I'm going to lose some of you, right? If I walk away right now for 10 minutes, some of you are going to hang up, would be my hunch, right? But if everyone's doing the same thing, right, we can actually run class in a different way, but like in a synchronous fashion, right? Like a live class. And that won't change even if the DOE called tonight and said, hey, we can't come into the building tomorrow because there were 2 maybe cases. Everyone has to stay home, right? Like this class still meets tomorrow, right? Some of the kids just don't come into the building, right? But we're able to like keep some consistency in terms of the like how often and when the classes are meeting. Did that answer? I don't know if I answered your question or went rogue.
It answered my question. It did. Yeah, that was it. Just would they be able to ask the question in the midst of the lesson so that they don't lose their thought?
Yeah. Yep.
And we're also like working on better incorporating. There are a lot of like teacher technology cool platforms that have come up. And so there are certain platforms where students can actually like move their cursor to indicate like how confident they feel about material as you're teaching it. There are ways for them to like draw directly on your slide or type a question that they have. And so teachers are definitely getting creative about ways that everything we're doing is interactive, so that it's not a teacher talking straight for 15 minutes, but like students are actively interacting for the extent of the time that they are doing synchronous learning.
I have a question. For students who are doing total remote learning, for like materials that would have otherwise been given to students who would have been in school, how do those students get those materials that they're going to need?
That's a good question. By materials, like, do you mean like textbooks or like paper and pencils and pens?
Yes,
like,
yes, like textbooks, yes.
Yeah, so we, this isn't approved, right? But like, I think that there's going to be some sort of day, right, where people could like come, maybe not inside the building, but like maybe it's like set up outside, right? Because there's a lot of paperwork that we have to collect, just like regular registration paperwork. We're going to also be giving out computers and hotspots if necessary. Mr. Roberts and I drove our cars last spring around the city to do this, and it was amazing and lovely and like in the moment, but I just would rather not do that, at least to as many houses as we visited this last spring. So I think there'll be some sort of like registration days where people can like, maybe we'll have some tables set up outside. Hopefully it's not a tropical storm like yesterday, and people can, you know, we can exchange what we need to exchange and get people set up, at least to start for the first few weeks, right? Like it's not the whole year, hopefully, but we can, you know, make sure people have what they need to get started.
Thank you.
Yeah. If there's no other questions right now, I think we should sign off. If you have more questions, right, we will be doing this again tonight, but you can also set up a time to talk with any of us on the phone or via Zoom if you want to talk about any specifics, you know, as they relate to your family. Be happy to do that. Maddie, anything else before we sign off from your perspective? Shreya, Steve?
This was thank you. This was very informative. And at the same time, we were able to discuss, you know, our concerns as teachers which always relates to students and parents. So I'm proud to be a maker.
Yep.
Straight up. And appreciate the transparency. I mean, I hope you all do, because you know, although I feel like in these times they're trying to utilize the fact that we miss you guys to say, hey, you should come back, you know. But seeing it though it's not safe, it's that's the biggest part for me, the safety. Definitely is. But again, we want to be extremely sensitive to people who need that structure, you know, to have your kid come to a school. So you got to reach out to us, please. Please reach out to us. We have the leadership thing in it. We should throw it in one more time before we leave, all right? And I'll put my email address as well.
Yep.
Just to confirm, when you send us this PowerPoint, we can share it?
Yes, once we send it out, we know that it's out into the world. I just want to wait until we get our second parent meeting day, just to make sure that you know, that all families have a shot to, you know, to take a look and to give some, you know, to give some feedback on it.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I think looking at it, I mean, I haven't seen anything as comprehensive as what you guys have put together, and I really appreciate that.
And I'll just echo that, like, this was very much started, not by me, right? I am in support of it, right? But it was really started by like our teachers at the school. So it's a really great place to work. I'm proud to be a part of it. And I think we'll sign off. We'll do the Zoom thing for everyone.
I saw Shannon was trying to say something, I think.
Oh, I just wanted to say thank you for being honest, because it's been really hard to make decisions about the fully remote versus the hybrid learning, when there's kind of the party line of it's all going to be fine coming from the city. So it is refreshing to actually be told, hey, we really don't think this is the best choice. If you have a way to avoid coming into the building, please do.
Yeah.
Shannon, makers make it happen. All right.
All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. Have a good night.
Stay safe, everyone.
That's right.